It's her first day as a waitress when she gets a terrifying text. Get him out before 9:40 or your mother and sister die. She has 7 minutes to convince a billionaire CEO to leave his multimillion-dollar meeting. He thinks she's crazy, but when he finally listens and they step outside with 30 seconds to spare, the cafe explodes behind them. She just saved his life, but who sent that message? And why did someone want him dead? Stay until the end. This thriller will leave you breathless. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. You need to leave. Sir, said the new waitress to the CEO, seconds before the deal was about to close. The clock showed 9:30 in the morning when James Mitchell crossed the doors of the Copper Café, a discreet but elegant place located on a quiet corner in downtown Chicago. He wore a dark blue suit, perfectly tailored, and walked with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in control. His cold, calculating eyes analyzed every corner of the place as he headed to the reserved table in the back, away from curious gazes. That morning, he was about to close a multi-million-dollar contract with Canadian investors interested in his new real estate project, a luxury complex in Miami Beach. The deal not only meant a brutal injection of capital, but also the consolidation of his empire as the most powerful in the Midwest. A few tables away, Emily Rivera adjusted her white apron with trembling hands. It was her first day as a waitress in that cafe, and she felt her heart pounding in her throat. At 23 years old, Emily had never worked in a place like this, where silence weighed as much as prestige. She came from a simple family in Oak Park and had accepted this temporary job to help with the medical expenses of her sick mother. The manager, a severe-faced woman named Margaret, had assigned her exactly the area where James and his group of investors were located. "Be careful, girl. Don't you dare spill soup on someone important's suit," she had warned with a disdainful gesture. Emily took a deep breath and grabbed a tray with 3 cups of coffee. She advanced toward James's table with careful steps. Just as she was preparing to set down the cups, she felt the vibration of her cell phone in her pocket. She shouldn't have it with her, but something had told her to bring it. She pulled out the phone discreetly and read the message on the screen. "Get him out of there before 9:40. If not, your mother and your sister die. Don't question it. Don't fail." Her face went pale. The words seemed to burn in her eyes. She looked around trying to find a familiar face, a sign, something, but there was nothing. Just men in suits talking in English and Spanish. Controlled laughter, the clinking of spoons on porcelain cups. Emily swallowed hard. She felt her legs trembling. She had exactly 7 minutes. How the hell was she going to do it? What if he didn't listen to her? What if he thought she was crazy? What if it was too late? She approached with hesitant steps, the table where James was reviewing some documents with a concentrated look. One of the investors was making a joke about bourbon, but James wasn't even smiling. "Mr. Mitchell," Emily murmured, her voice trembling. "Excuse me, I need to speak with you." "It's urgent." James looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Who are you? What kind of service is this? I'm in an important meeting. Please, just 1 minute. It's for your safety," she begged, unable to control the tremor in her voice. He frowned, sat up slightly, sizing up the young woman with a sharp look. He was going to reject her with disdain, but something in Emily's eyes made him stop. It wasn't theater. It wasn't a scam. It was pure panic. Authentic, real pain. "What's happening?" he asked, lowering his voice. "I can't explain, just please, you have to leave here now." The investors looked at each other confused. One of them asked in English if everything was okay. James raised a hand for them to wait. Something deep in his instinct, the same one that had saved him on several occasions in business, screamed at him to listen. Without saying more, he stood up, took his coat, his cell phone, and walked with Emily toward the exit. There were barely 30 seconds left until 9:40 when they crossed the cafe door. James stopped on the sidewalk about to demand an explanation, but didn't manage to say a single word. A deafening explosion shattered the cafe windows. The blast shook the ground. The heat from the shockwave pushed them backward. Glass, smoke, screams. Everything became chaos in a matter of seconds. Emily fell to the ground. James, dazed, covered her with his body as dust filled the air. People ran in all directions. Cars braked. Someone screamed that there were injured, to call an ambulance, that there were dead. The businessman stood up with difficulty. He had a cut on his forehead. He looked at the smoking remains of the cafe where less than a minute ago he was about to sign the biggest deal of his life. His assistant, the investors, they were all still inside. He turned to look at Emily. She had a lost gaze, her hands covered in dust and someone else's blood. She was in a state of shock. "Are you okay?" he asked, crouching next to her. Emily barely nodded, unable to speak. James took out his phone, called Marcus, his head of security, and within minutes he had an armored vehicle waiting for him on the corner. He helped Emily up and put her in the car. "You're coming with me, and you're going to tell me everything. But first, we're going to protect your family. What you just did saved my life." Emily broke down crying, exhausted, scared, not understanding how her world had changed in so few minutes. As the vehicle drove away from the scene, escorted by a patrol that had arrived at the site, James Mitchell looked out the window at the ruins of the cafe. Someone had tried to kill him, and now he needed to know who and why. But one thing was certain. The young woman trembling beside him was not his enemy. She was the key. The silence in James Mitchell's penthouse was thick, almost unreal, as if the entire world was holding its breath after that morning's explosion. Through the enormous windows, the city could be seen stretching out until it was lost among gray clouds. In one of the living rooms, Emily Rivera remained seated on a leather sofa with a blanket over her shoulders and a cup of tea in her trembling hands. She hadn't uttered a single word since they arrived. She had accepted the tea that an assistant offered her, but had barely tasted it. Her eyes remained lost, fixed on an invisible point. James, standing in front of her, watched her in silence. His cell phone hadn't stopped ringing in the last 2 hours. Journalists, authorities, his lawyers, partners, and even his younger sister asking him for explanations. He hadn't answered any of them. "Emily," he finally said with a softer voice than he usually used with anyone. "I need you to tell me everything you know. What they told you, who contacted you." She slowly raised her eyes. Her eyes, still swollen from crying, shone with a mixture of guilt and fear. "I don't know who it was. I got an anonymous message on my cell phone. They told me that if I didn't get you out of the cafe before a certain time, they were going to kill my mom and my sister. I had no choice. Where are they now?" asked James, taking a seat in front of her. "At home in Oak Park. We live in an apartment building. My mom is sick. She can barely walk. My sister goes to high school in the afternoon. Please," her voice broke, "don't hurt them. I didn't know anything about the explosion, I swear." James observed her carefully. He had learned to read people, and what he saw in Emily was not a lie. This girl had been used, and used intelligently. She was perfect, clean, with no connection to him whatsoever, totally innocent, at least in appearance. He took out his cell phone, dialed a direct number. "Marcus, I need a team in Oak Park. Now. Get Emily Rivera's family out and bring them here under protection. Nobody enters or leaves without your authorization. Use whatever you need." He paused and added, "Bring them to the security floor." He hung up and turned to her. "No one is going to hurt them, I promise." Emily broke down crying for the second time that day, this time with relief. James stood up, handed her a napkin, and offered her another cup of tea. Then, as if it were an emergency protocol, he activated a screen on the wall and projected several images of the attack site. "My team is already reviewing the cafe cameras. And there's something that doesn't add up," he said while navigating through the videos. "This camera, the one pointing directly at the main entrance, was tampered with. There's a jump of exactly 12 minutes just before you and I arrived." 12 minutes? Emily repeated, confused. "Yes, and that could only be done by someone with access to the system, someone who knew I would be there at that exact time." At that moment, a robust man entered the apartment. With a trimmed beard, dark glasses, and an ex-military attitude. He greeted with a slight nod. "Marcus Bridges, head of security for Mitchell Corporation," he said in a deep voice, looking at Emily. "We've located your family. They're fine. On their way." "Thank you," she whispered. "And this," added James, while approaching another older man with gray hair and an elegant cane, "is Julian Hayes, retired detective, old family friend." "I still know how to recognize a stage scene," said Julian, taking a seat with difficulty. This was an attack planned with military precision. No errors, no witnesses, someone with a lot of resources and personal motivation. James nodded thoughtfully. Then, almost as if talking to himself, he murmured, "It had to be someone from the inside." The silence became more tense. Emily looked at them as if they were characters in a movie she never thought she'd live. The morning had started like any other, and now she found herself in a luxury apartment, guarded by bodyguards, surrounded by men talking about bombs and conspiracies. Hours later, when her mother and sister finally arrived, Emily ran to hug them. They were scared but unharmed. Marcus assigned them a room on the floor below with 24-hour surveillance. That night, James walked through his study surrounded by architectural plans, sketches, and photographs of completed works. On one of the shelves, a clay figure with an abstract shape caught attention. Emily, who entered with a cup of coffee for him, observed it sideways. "Did you make that?" she asked. James shook his head. "An ex gave it to me. She was an artist. Victoria studied art. She opened a gallery with my help. Then she left me for another who promised less money, but more freedom. I never knew if it was real or part of something else." Emily approached the figure and turned it slightly. "It's well made. It has strength, but no heart." James looked at her curiously. "Did you study art?" She nodded with a nostalgic smile. "A couple of semesters before I had to drop out, Mom got sick and someone had to work. I always wanted to dedicate myself to painting, but well, life decides other things, right?" James took the cup, tasted it, and for the first time in a long time smiled. "Thank you for saving my life, Emily." "It wasn't for you," she responded honestly. "It was for them," he nodded. "Still, I owe you more than you imagine, and I won't stop until I discover who tried to kill me." Outside, night settled over Chicago, while the lights of the penthouse shone like an island of protection among the darkness. But what was coming was much more than simple revenge. It was the beginning of something deeper and much more dangerous. Mornings in James Mitchell's penthouse had changed. They were no longer silent or meticulously solitary. Now the coffee smelled different. There were voices in the kitchen, and the reinforced security made every corner of the building seem like a bunker. James, sitting in front of 3 screens full of graphics and records, reviewed every file, every name, every face with a calculated obsession. "Here it is," said Marcus Bridges, entering with a firm step and a file in hand. Aaron Rodriguez, development manager, accessed the architectural plans of the building where the explosion was. Exactly 21 days before the attack. James took the file, opened it, and read in silence. He had known Aaron for years. He had trusted him with multimillion-dollar projects. He had allowed him to grow within the company as a protege, and now everything pointed to him having been part of the attack. "Did you know he had a new house in Evanston?" added Marcus. "They say he paid for it in cash, not bad for someone with his salary." "Any direct connection with Richard Hartman?" asked James without looking up. "Not yet, but Julian is investigating." As if the name had summoned him, Julian Hayes appeared at the door. He had his hat in one hand and a crooked smile on his face. "Well, you don't have to search anymore." "I found the connection." James stood up. Emily, who at that moment was entering with a notebook and a cup of coffee, froze when she heard the detective's tone. "Aaron received deposits from a shell company registered in Illinois. And you know who appears as a silent partner? Richard Hartman, your old enemy." James clenched his jaw. Richard was more than a rival. He was the shadow that had followed him for years. A business shark who didn't play fair and who had almost ruined him in the past. "Is that all?" he asked, although he knew it wasn't. "There's more. Victoria, your ex, has financial ties to the same shell company. 3 transfers in the last 6 months. No doubt the 3 of them are working together." James felt a pang in his chest. Victoria had not only been his partner, she had been his ally, his muse. At a time when he still believed in love. The betrayal hurt more than he wanted to admit. Emily, who had remained silent until then, took a step forward. "Maybe I can help." That day at the cafe, when I approached the table, I heard one of the investors say something weird. He asked you if you weren't worried about being summoned to such a public place, and you responded that only 3 people knew you would be there. James frowned. "My assistant, Aaron, and Victoria." "Exactly," said Emily. "And the message I received had the exact time. Whoever sent it knew where and when." "They used your innocence," murmured Julian. "A girl with no record, No connection to James. Perfect to distract and make him leave without raising suspicions. James took a deep breath and walked to the window. From there, the city seemed calm, but he knew that beneath that calm, dangerous pieces were moving. "We're going to catch them," he finally said with a firm voice. "And we're going to do it my way." Hours later, James called an emergency meeting at his main offices. In the email sent to high-ranking employees, he explained that the company was under investigation after the attack, and that he would evaluate a possible sale or partial closure of operations. Aaron was the first to confirm his attendance. Victoria appeared with an impeccable black dress and a rehearsed smile. Richard didn't respond, but Julian already had 2 undercover officers ready to follow him. The day of the meeting, James arrived with Marcus and Emily by his side. There were hidden cameras, microphones in every corner, and public prosecutor's office agents waiting in an adjoining room. When Victoria entered the boardroom, her expression changed when she saw Emily sitting there. "What is she doing here?" she asked, annoyed. "Observing," James responded, "like you should have done instead of betraying me." Aaron entered after, nervous, sweating. He sat down without saying a word. The tension was a knife suspended over their heads. "Thank you for coming," began James with a cold tone. "This company has been my life, but today I have discovered that not everyone who is here deserves to be part of it." "What are you saying?" Victoria jumped up. "I'm saying," he continued, "that I found the traitor, or rather, the 3 traitors." At that moment, the screens turned on showing evidence. Bank movements, recordings, intercepted emails and photographs of meetings between Aaron and Richard. "This is a setup," Aaron shouted, standing up. "Oh yeah? Then explain to me why I found confidential blueprints in your personal email," Marcus intervened. Victoria tried to leave the room, but 2 agents stopped her. Richard at the same time was being arrested in his office in Naperville. He had fallen for money laundering and conspiracy to commit murder. James watched as all 3 were handcuffed. None of them could hold his gaze. When it was all over, Emily looked at him with a mixture of astonishment and respect. "Were you always this calculating?" James barely smiled. "I learned to do it. The world doesn't forgive mistakes. But you taught me that sometimes it's worth trusting, even in someone completely unexpected." That night, while the city slept oblivious to the scandal that was about to break in the media, James and Emily sat on the penthouse balcony. He with a whiskey in hand, she with a notebook drawing without looking. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about business, or revenge, or money. He was thinking about her. 6 months had passed since the arrest of Victoria, Aaron, and Richard. 6 months of trials, scandalous headlines, and endless audits. But also 6 months of reconstruction, not just of businesses, but of lives. James Mitchell, the businessman known for his coldness and relentless ambition, made a decision that surprised the entire real estate sector. He stopped all his projects indefinitely. "It's not just about building buildings," he declared to the press, "but about building something that has soul." Shortly after, he announced the creation of Horizons Foundation, a cultural center located in the heart of Chicago, a space designed to offer art, music, dance and literature workshops to young people from marginalized communities. The biggest surprise was when he introduced its director, Emily Rivera. "This place wouldn't exist without her," said James during the inauguration. "Her courage saved lives. Her vision will change many more." Emily, with a simple wine-colored dress and a smile that didn't fit on her face, faced a room full of cameras for the first time. She thanked through tears. She spoke of her mother, her sister, her stalled dreams, and the power of art as a lifeline. The foundation grew faster than expected. James provided the resources. Emily provided the heart. They surrounded themselves with local artists, cultural managers, and young people with difficult stories but overflowing talent. Months later, Emily resumed her art degree with a full scholarship. She studied in the afternoons, directed in the mornings, and painted at night. James became her biggest admirer, accompanying her to exhibitions, workshops, and even craft fairs where he usually felt out of place. And without noticing it, they began to fall in love. It wasn't immediate or intense. It was slow, almost silent. Shared glances in the middle of chaos, long conversations in the foundation studio, aimless walks on Sundays. Respect became complicity. Admiration transformed into tenderness. A year later, On any given sunset, James asked her to stay that night, not as a guest, not as someone protected, but as someone who was already part of his life. "I don't know how to love you," he confessed, "but I want to learn with you." Emily didn't respond with words. She kissed him. 2 years had passed since that day at the Copper Café, that day when everything changed. And right there, where they once trembled with fear among broken glass and smoke, they returned. The cafe had been rebuilt faithfully, but with new details. Murals painted by young people from the foundation, stained glass with floral motifs, and a discreet plaque next to the entrance that said, "To be reborn is to return to the place where almost everything ends, but with new eyes." That was the chosen setting for their wedding. Only family, close friends, foundation artists, and the few employees who remained from the old days were present. Emily wore a handmade design by a former student. James wore a light suit, no tie by her decision. During the ceremony, a girl recited a poem written by the students. It spoke of light, of hope, and how art could heal invisible wounds. James, with glassy eyes, squeezed Emily's hand. At the end, there was no luxurious banquet or entertainment cameras, just mariachi music, sweet bread, pot coffee, and sincere laughter. A year later, Lorenzo arrived, their son, brown-skinned like her, with intense eyebrows like him, and with an energy that transformed every corner of the penthouse into a play area. Both learned to balance family life with running the foundation. Emily organized traveling exhibitions. James designed recreational spaces in forgotten areas. Together, they inaugurated a program that brought art workshops to indigenous communities and juvenile prisons. Every time a reporter asked how it all began, James responded the same. With an explosion. But the strongest thing wasn't the bomb. It was the way she looked at me and forced me to see the world differently. Emily, for her part, said, "I didn't save him. I was just the push he needed to save himself." What was truly miraculous was that he decided to save me too. And so, over time, they left behind the pain, fear, and betrayal. They didn't forget them. They just learned not to live tied to them. Because when two souls meet in the middle of chaos and decide to walk together, there is no bomb that destroys what they build. I hope you enjoyed the story. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, God bless you, and see you in the next story. Yeah.